so a little bit. All right. Welcome to another episode of Anime Village Podcast. We are joined by a very special guest, Makena Song. She's an author, writer, and editor. You might be able to see her a recent webtoon called King Bee. So thank you so much, Makena, for joining us. And I'm joined by Bryan Soroka, our co-founder of Anime Village too. So thank you, Bryan, for joining as well too. So
pleasure as always.
Yeah, it's appreciate you both being on the show today. Makena, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. This is my first podcast experience, obviously, so I'm a little nervous, but I'm really excited to talk about King Bee. So thank you.
Oh,
we're gonna geek out. Nothing to be nervous about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're all big fans of anime, art, mangas, and all everything. So nothing. We're gonna have a lot of fun with this podcast. So we'll make sure it's enjoyable for you and for your first podcast. So thank you so much for being able to join. So tell us about. I want to jump into it because King Bee is recently published on Webtoon on Voice Me. Tell us what it's like to see your first webtoon, King Bee, and what's the feeling like to see your character that you created come to life?
It's really phenomenal. Obviously, I started just doing personal writing through like Wattpad and some other sites. And so I was more on the side of like, oh, if I did get art done, it was done for free by just people who supported the series. So having an actual like character design sheet for all of the characters that like obviously I had like not only created from like a this is what they should look like, this is their name, this is their personality, and having that all come together was really cool. And just in general, seeing the actual process of webcomic production was interesting as well, since I had always consumed webcomic from Voice Me and from Webtoons, but to see like every single step, from the drafting to the line art to the color phase, like that was really it was a great learning moment for me, and it helps me to understand how everything breaks down. So
that's really cool. So on the when you see like a webtoon or the webcomic come to life, especially with like Voice Me, do you have like a say of like the colors or anything? How's that work out?
So currently for my specific series, we are working with an art studio. And so I have a lot of, do a lot of direction for the drafting and each stage of the process. Because it's my first time, Dylan, the CEO, actually stepped in and helped me to send out the directions in terms of like, hey, this is what we normally do. This is how you would talk to the art team. These are the kind of things that you want to look out for. And so that was really helpful on my end. And so I do have a little bit of say in it. Obviously, we had something where I wanted a specific character to look a certain way. And so we had to go through and redo certain like line art and make sure that that was really kind of consistent throughout the entire series. And so that was one of the things that I had to learn, like, hey, I need to make sure that in this stage, I'm going to reach out and say this, this, and this. And so in terms of other stages, usually the line art is the biggest one because that's the one where they have the actual like image itself and where you need to spend the most time as the author looking at it and being like, okay, is this what I wanted to convey in this panel? Obviously, there are times when it's like more subtle things like, oh, this character's face looks a little off, whereas other times it's like, okay, the entire scene is from a different perspective than what I wanted. So I do have stuff like that. But overall, my art studio were really their experience, so they're able to fill in the gaps where I was missing. So like, so like sometimes when I didn't know how to explain things, they were like, okay, no, I got you. So they went in and smoothed out some of the stuff. It was really great.
That's awesome. That's great. It's awesome that you're able to work with such a great art studio that can kind of like pinpoint and pick up what you're saying, and they're able to put it down for you. So that's awesome. And then Bryan, like as Makena mentioned, like the character sheet and character like personalities. Like I don't want to ask both. Like, what's it like when you create your your protagonist and your antagonist and other characters? What's it like for like you guys to create that personality and like look at that personality of like a character and how you want them to be? And I don't know, Bryan, you want to answer this first, then McKenna, you can answer after.
Sure. Should also say that we're going to have a presence on Voice Me as well. I actually just uploaded the first chapter of Adamanto onto their platform, and we're in discussions to do a webtoon as well. So I just wanted to get that out there. I was listening very intently to what you were saying about the process working with their art team, because obviously, presenting a story in manga form and then going into webtoon form is quite different. So, you kind of take that multi-panel approach from manga and then you distill it to a panel per page essentially for the webtoon experience. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into that as well. Sorry, just a bit of a
That's
segue there,
exciting.
but I mean, really, it's in the way I kind of tackle characterizing, whether it's a protagonist or an antagonist. It's kind of like, that old adage where you write what you know. So you're just kind of pulling from different experiences you've had with different people or different situations, and then kind of like imbuing the characters with that sensibility. I think really, I mean, the greatest attribute to a character and how you can define them from others is through dialogue in my experience, and dialogue is kind of lacking, I think, in manga in a lot of ways, and there's several reasons for that, mostly because of the translation, right? So when you're talking about colloquialisms, you're talking about synonyms, homonyms, all those wonderful things in the English language, it doesn't really translate to Japanese and vice versa. So you kind of have that disconnect sometimes. So, talking about Adamanto, it's really kind of like a hybrid. So I wanted to get like that really crisp, sharp dialogue in there, and that helps define the characters. So for instance, we have Lord Kami, who's the big bad guy, like literally big. He's like 8'11", 2,045 pounds. The way he speaks is very kind of romanticized, but it's very sharp. It's got an edge to it, right? And then you have Shinichi, where it's a bit more, I don't want to say guttural, but it is a bit more kind of like street level, where he just wants to get business done. It's kind of emblematic of his character, where he's a no nonsense guy. He just goes, does his job, goes home, right? So that's his whole thing. So I'll leave it to you. How do you define your characters?
Um, so especially for King Bee, and so actually we started with the location. It was an isekai slash fantasy comedy. So we decided, okay, where do we want this located? At first, I was like, I know a lot more about America, but then again, I was thinking, okay, a lot of isekai is actually out of Japan.
Yeah.
And I did visit Japan and know a lot about Japanese culture through my college studies and just in general from anime consumption. So I didn't I didn't lean heavily too much into the anime side in the sense of, I'm going to do some really cringy like scenes, but I took it as as this is the base. It's only going to be there for like 2 chapters. So where do I want this to be? And what do I know kind of works in the industry? And so the name is actually based off a pun, and because it's a comedy series, I was allowed to get away with it. Thank goodness. So
Nice.
his first name is Hachi, and his last name is Mitsu. So Hachi Mitsu means honey in Japanese.
Oh,
Um, and
See,
so some people,
I love that, because you're actually, that when it comes to naming conventions, I did the same thing. So Shinichi Tanso, who's our chief protagonist, Shinichi is actually named after Sonny Chiba, who's one of my favorite martial arts actor. And then you have Tanso, which roughly translates to very strong, almost unbreakable. And that's kind of like the premise of the book. So yeah, I always love it when I hear how people come up with names, and then there's a story behind the name as relates to either the premise of the story or the character itself.
and I think that's like one of my favorite things is actually like character naming. And so I put a lot of emphasis on my other works. I also do that. I make sure like, okay, are they representing like a color, which, color theory, or are they representing kind of an idea? Or obviously in the case of Hachimitsu, is it a direct translation to a pun?
Yeah.
So you'll see that throughout the rest of like the King Bee series. I have certain names or certain of characters or places that are very symbolic. In terms of forming the character's personality, that was something I actually had to workshop a little bit more to keep it consistent. Obviously, I had to go kind of with genuine reactions. Okay, how is he going to justify transporting into this world? A lot of main protagonists, they kind of either like accept it, or it takes them a really long time to kind of wake up and realize, okay, I'm in this different world. For my character, he thought he was kidnapped. So he was trying to escape. I tried to make him as realistic as possible. I think one of the things that people love about isekai is kind of putting a foreign person, in the sense of like they are not foreign to the world, native to the world, and making it like they're sticking out like a sore thumb. So it's really easy in Hachi's case because he was wearing a bee suit. Um,
Yeah, that makes it a bit different.
Yeah.
for the antagonist, actually, people in the creative team actually really helped me with that. So our main antagonist of the pilot series is actually like a labor union-esque group or slash organization. And so it's obviously not about like, actual industrial revolution, but it's kind of based off that and the whole like production of back in the day textiles and machinery, and in this case it's honey. So we kind of played with that, combining history, anime, and all of the
Yeah,
other stuff.
it always amazes me how many different factors or variables go into it. I always used a trick, I guess, not a trick, but a process when it comes to defining characters. And I learned this from another writer many, many years ago, where you take a very mundane situation, let's say people waiting for a bus, and the bus is late by 15 minutes. Take the characters that you've already created. How would that character react in that situation? And then you just map it out, and then it's the same thing. The characters go to a restaurant and they get the bill, and it's more than they expected. How does that character react? It kind of seems silly, but at the same time, I've worked out dozens of characters that way, where it's like Lord Kami is waiting for a bus. How does he react? Well, he gets pissed off and he probably destroys the bus shelter. Where Shinichi decides, you know what, I'm just going to hoof it. Stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
little tricks like that can help you define the character.
Exactly. With Hachimitsu specifically, as a final note, he's college age. So I just recently graduated from university, so I can understand his thought patterns, and that's kind of why I was like, it's a lot easier for me to translate my kind of experience and knowledge,
Yeah.
maturity levels to a college student versus if I were to write a middle or high school student. So
Do you find it easier developing female characters as opposed to male characters? Because speaking for myself, as a male person, you can identify more closely with that in a lot of cases, not in all cases, but just interesting to hear what your take is on that.
yeah, of course. So when I first started writing, my longest running series in terms of um, production and then actually writing it and getting it finished was Among the Fallen. So I won't go too much into it if we decide to talk about it later. But my main character is male. I think when I started writing, I wanted kind of to create a world and characters that I didn't envision myself as. I didn't want to self insert. I didn't want this thing
Yeah.
where I was kind of putting my own experiences into my character, although um, obviously some of it does come out because I am the author
Can't
of my
help it.
characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I wanted someone completely different. So even in my other works, they're usually like, sometimes they're not the same race as I am. Sometimes they're not the same, obviously not the same gender. They don't have the same personality. They don't have the same eye color, hair color. A lot of that has to do with me just seeing writing as a means of like comfort, in the sense of I don't have to see myself, like I'm not writing myself.
Yeah.
And I also, when I went through that and I started writing, actually, I didn't see the difference. But I mean, in the sense of like, I didn't really see the difference between writing a guy and a girl. So I just kind of wrote because I started middle school. So in terms of writing, I would say that there probably are some times when maybe I don't perfectly have the right mindset for a college age male or like men in general. But in the same sense, I kind of look at it from like a mainline, they're still people, at the end of the
Yeah.
day. So if I'm transporting a random person into a fantasy world, um, two people with the same personality or mindset, regardless of their gender or their race or their culture, like would probably react the same. Where am I? And so that's kind of what helped me throughout writing these characters. So
Nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's such an interesting. I mean, that was a great question, Brian. That's such an interesting fact too of the ask of like, how is it better to write on, gender and, age. And I think that's kind of cool how kind of how you mentioned that, like you reference back to like you just graduated college, but you're also, like the struggles of going through college. I think it's been on college a while now, so it's kind of, I can't remember all the struggles. I think I just remember all the relief of no bills and stuff like that.
And even longer for me, Jeff, even longer for me.
Yeah. So how like and how long did you like how long did it take you to come up with the idea for King Bee, and or like sit on it, or like what was the thought process to like, hey, I really want to make this character and make this happen? Like what was that process like?
So the original process was working kind of ideating with the creative team at Voice Me. So we actually kind of collaboratively came up with the base idea together, and we kind of just threw things at each other. Hey, what is trending right now? What is, what would be a very interesting story, something that we haven't focused on? And also, we wanted to breach a new genre, so comedy. A lot of the Voice Me series, as standing, is very action heavy focused, which is their spotlight. Like their genre that it really stands out is action, so that makes sense. But we wanted to see, would a series like this, which is 80% comedy, actually work out and get new readers and attract new people in general. And so that was kind of that. In terms of actually coming up with the base plot, I actually, like at 12 a.m., I think one night was like, oh my gosh, I'm really motivated to just like, hammer this out, hammer out the details. So I created this random Google Doc and just, on my phone at 12 a.m. with only the screen light, just tapped away.
Been there.
And then I sent it over to the rest of the creative team and I just said, hey, what do you think? And we went through step by step the paragraphs and we're like, yeah, we could totally go this way. They suggested the labor union idea, which is fantastic. And we just kind of went off from there. Similar to the character, we kind of have a format that we use when we're doing pre-production documents. And so I followed kind of that, and it started to form into an actual, like, more than idea, into an actual like story. So overall, that was really amazing to have that support as well.
That's
That's
awesome.
cool.
That's really
Yeah.
cool. And Brian, for yourself too, I mean, when you wrote Adamanto, and I think we touched upon it in other podcasts, but like, and you mentioned when McKenna had said she was on her phone in the middle of the night. Have you been there and stuff like that? Did you ever experience that when you're with Adamanto and like coming up with a
Yeah, man,
approach?
all the time. It's, sometimes, let's say when you hit a roadblock with a certain scene or a certain action or even in character development, then all of a sudden you wake up in the middle of the night and it comes to you. That's where cell phones definitely come in handy, where I just shoot myself a quick email saying, oh, okay, this is, before I forget it, because it always happens. And sometimes I haven't written it down and I've always been sorry for it, because when I wake up in the morning, I can't remember what the hell I figured it out, right? So you never want to be left doing that. But with the genres, I mean, it's like, I think you're right, where there's a lot of action, there's a lot of adventure, but it's how do you distinguish yours from all the other stuff that's out there? And that's why at Anime Village, when we're developing our own manga, we decided to segregate it into 4 distinct primary genres. So we have action, we have adventure, we have supernatural, and slice of life. Slice of life being one of the most popular categories in anime, manga, however, even, Western storytelling, right? People love drama, people love comedy, they love musicals and stuff like that. I myself, not a big fan. So when it comes to actually developing, we have an original manga slice of life title called Tuning Kigo. When we're developing that, fleshing out the stories and the characters and all that, I'm staying well away because I'm not going to do it justice. Maybe you want to hop on board, down the line where we can get somebody else, who actually enjoys it, right? Because that's one of the main things with writing too, right? It can't become a job, right? It can't become just like you're walking into the office, you're sitting down behind a computer and you're doing your thing, right? When I get up in the morning and I start banging out scripts or creating new characters, like I've got a smile on my face, right? Like sometimes I look in the mirror and I hope nobody can see me because I look like an absolute moron. So it's that kind of feeling that internally you want to be able to feel like that when you're creating the story, because I wholly believe that when people read these stories, and what makes a lot of especially manga and anime popular and so readable and so watchable is you can feel the love. Like the people that are creating this stuff love the content, right? And the same with Adamanto. Like it's my love letter to shonen, to action movies, to kung fu flicks and all that kind of stuff. And if you can't feel the love, then I haven't done my job, because there's a lot of it that went into it. And now that I'm doing our supernatural title called Undead Reckoning, I think that's even trumped Adamanto as my favorite title, because I'm having such a good time writing it, right? But maybe its absence makes the heart go fonder, in that sense. But we'll see. I mean, but I tend to ramble when it comes to this sort of stuff. But really, you got to kind of stay in your lane when it comes to the stuff you love, because I really do believe that if you're just writing something just to get it out, just to push it out, you'll never get that same kind of quality, that same kind of reaction from the audience that you hope to build.
Yeah, that's a super solid point, and you have to have the passion for it and right about everything, and it's awesome that you both have creating great things, great authors. I'm sitting here, I feel like all I know is how to write numbers sometimes because I'm an accountant on this, but that's all I got going for me. You always tell a story through a number, but I want to know, Makena, what age did the passion for writing start coming about for yourself, and how did that all come about?
So I think from an early age, when I was in elementary school, my mom used to read me so many books. Maybe just because I was pestering her, maybe because I actually like books. She would read to me, and that developed a passion for stories. Um, I actually, the other day, I had a call with my mom, and she was like, "Yeah, you just were always, asking me to come up with stories when you were little, like, and I am not as imaginative as you were, so it was very difficult." And so she had the same like two stories on repeat, but I loved it. So I think in middle school, when I was introduced kind of to the idea of Wattpad, that was when I started actually writing. And, obviously you go through the really cringy phases early on, a little bit of fan fiction, a little bit of, just random story ideas that you come up with that aren't fully fleshed out. I mean, middle school. And from there you start to actually wonder, okay, do I want to actually create like a novel, something that's more than a few chapters, something that is more um, in depth. And so I started writing Among the Fallen, and that kind of nurtured my love of writing. And crazy enough, I think in high school, I had a set of really amazing English teachers, which not a lot of people can say. My English teacher to this day is my biggest inspiration for like creative and academic and work writing. Um,
Nice.
and so her kind of passion for writing and like things that you wouldn't usually be passionate about, like, classic literature or, poems or, grammar. Like she loved talking about grammar. Those things solidified my love of writing too. So, yeah, overall, I think it's just been a process since I was little. So much to some other stuff that I like as well.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And so you mentioned Among the Fallen, like I mean, that which ranks in the top 40 in fantasy on, I can't remember what the website was, but I saw it on, but that's pretty crazy that that ranks that high. And where did you come up with the idea for Among the Fallen? Like you mentioned in high school, you were writing it, but like what can you give us a little detail of the background about it as well too?
Yes. So, Among the Fallen was kind of still very much a personal project. I hope to publish it one day. I'm kind of going through multiple editing phases. But in general, the idea really came from like, I want to write fantasy. How am I going to write fantasy? I had been inspired by multiple different works, and and also history. One thing I find is that whenever I learn anything about history, I was in a history course at that point. I just want to like merge it in. And so, and religion as well. I mean, like I think we were learning in like my AP World class, and then like other history courses about like Hinduism and reincarnation and this whole idea of like karma. And so I kind of implemented pieces of that into my story. And so obviously I also went to a Christian school, so I implemented some of those ideas, like the big good and evil, that you kind of see in other fantasy novels like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. And so overall, I think I just took really like core aspects, like the base of what fantasy is, and then I was like, okay, now just gonna add characters that I like writing, and then I just went from there.
That's
So
awesome. That's awesome. And then maybe like you maybe both can explain this. What is it about taking pieces of history and kind of reworking them and then adding them into, your own original concept. I mean, I can also like speak upon this because I haven't written anything, but like I watched Record of Ragnarok, and they took like characters from history and had them fight each other and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool, but like, and I love that aspect because I love history, so it's kind of cool to like see how people take and get inspired from history and like make it their own or the original
Yeah.
idea. And I
Mm.
mean, Brian, maybe you can start us off, and McKenna can follow up with that too.
Well, I think we've actually talked about this on previous podcasts as well, where I'm a huge fan of historical fiction, and I weave it in through pretty much anything that I've ever written throughout my writing career. I think I've pulled from some sort of real life occurrence, character, circumstance in some way or another. And Adamanto is certainly no exception. I mean, we've got characters like Abe no Semi, who is a magician, a master magician. He was a real character from Japanese lore. We have Oda Nobunaga, who was a warrior, right, from 12th century. But that's the thing with historical fiction. You can bend and play with it. So for instance, using Adamanto as an example again, it takes place in 7th century Japan. Well, samurais didn't come around until like I want to say the 10th, 12th century, but I got samurais running around there. So how do you kind of like balance that out, right? And there's certain characters that I've introduced, including, Leonidas of Sparta. We have Hannibal Barca. We have all of these like really well-known kind of warriors, tacticians, and I bring them all together, but they're all from different timelines, right? But they all exist in some way, shape, or form. So, you can play with it, but up to a point. Like it's kind of like I forget what movie it was, but they say if it's funny, it bends. If not, it breaks. It's the same thing when you're talking about using historical figures or circumstances within your stories, where it's like you can play with them a bit, but not to the point where they're unrecognizable. And I'm kind of wrestling with that with Undead Reckoning now, because that all starts off based on a real life event, the 2011 earthquake in Honshu, right? That
Yeah.
creates a rift that leads straight to Yomi, land of the undead, where all these spirits start coming up, and then they build this huge wall around the entire island of Honshu, right? But how do you kind of work that in with the fictional elements that you're introducing with all these characters? So it's always a balancing act, but it's so much fun getting there. It's just like a blast working in characters that I've created with characters that actually existed.
So cool. And then how about McKenna, about yourself? Where did the inspiration and all that come from?
I think one of the greatest things about writing stories is that like you can infuse so many different elements, whether it's from other fictional works, whether it's from history, and things that you learn throughout life, like, inspirational quotations, all of those things. For history, I kind of see it like you're always taught that history itself is like a story, like a never ending story. And so you kind of go back and you see different aspects, and also historical events recorded in textbooks or, back when scrolls and tablets. A lot of the times they say, oh, history is often written by the winners. And so now that we have a little bit more advanced technology to kind of look back, we can also see different perspectives from people that were not technically considered the winners. And so you kind of scrape the surface of what is like an even bigger story that's all interwoven and connected. In terms of like actually applying it, I think we look for comfort in our series. No matter how much we want new original content, at least I'm not going to speak for everyone in the world, but like when I'm reading and I'm watching, I want some semblance of like, if I kind of took back a layer, can I see the connection to historical events if that's what they're going for? Things like Attack on Titan, it is very so much clearly based off, World War II, the stuff that happened with the Holocaust and Jewish and the German, kind of conflict between each other. And that in and of itself is interesting, even though there's giants, there are
Yeah.
giants going and eating people. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to that, the conflict, and like the political scope of it. Similar to like if we think about one of the most popular Netflix series, what is it called again? Squid Game. Squid Games is one of those where
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
based off like, the Korea's, I think, bubble economy, and how
Yeah.
everyone was pushed into debt, and that, prompted these people who were millions of, the Korean currency into debt, and they had to go into this crazy death game. So it's kind of like we need that almost realism in order to accept and to almost like love these fantastical elements, because I don't know always, like there's sometimes we want, pure fantasy where everything is new, every character, every backstory, every history. But sometimes our brains want to break and we just want to watch an isekai, which is literally just a normal person going into a
Yeah.
fantasy world
Yeah.
with all the knowledge of modern, 21st century. So
I love it. I love it. That's such a great, I mean, both of you put like a great concept on that answer, and that's really, really, really cool. McKenna, I think I want to jump into now of like what inspired, like what animes like do you got, first of all, what was the first anime that got you into anime, and then also did you read anything too?
I think so. Obviously, everything's in middle school because, why not? I had a few friends actually in my middle school that were really big anime people, like to the point where, like, they just like talked about it a ton and a ton. They said, you should watch it, you should watch it. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I've been watching my Cartoon Network, my Avatar, The Last Airbender. And so, from Disney and, Nickelodeon, all the different shows. And I actually, when I started watching and using YouTube more frequently, I watched an OVA, one of those short
Yeah.
series, and it was like, I forgot the name. It was something like Maho Choco or something, which is like, it was like a magic chocolate anime. It was really weird. But I watched it, and then I think my first official series though was Kaichoa Maid Sama, which is like early 2000s romantic comedy series, which was just because it was free on YouTube. That was before I like knew about Crunchyroll or Funimation or
Yeah.
now Netflix and like everywhere is like streaming anime. So that was my official one. That was my first one.
I love that. That's awesome. Is there like, what do you? I want to ask too, and maybe it's not on the question sheet, but like, I want to maybe ask this, and Brian too. You can touch upon it as well too. What do you think about the popularity of anime and manga where it is now, and how much it's grown over the past, like, I don't know how many years now, but like, I mean, since COVID, it really has grown, like, gotten really, really big. Like, what are your thoughts on like the the growth of anime and manga and people really taking a highly interest into it from like, athletes, um, actors, actually, like everyone just kind of really into it. What are your
Everyone,
thoughts
it
on it?
seems. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's into it. Yeah, so
Oh,
McKenna.
oh,
Yeah.
do you want me to go first?
Yeah, yeah. If you
Okay.
want to go first, yeah,
So I took a course in college for like actually like Japanese pop culture through media. And I remember watching this documentary about the rise of anime and just in general, and anime films specifically, and that like it first originated off of like a very popular, I can't remember his name because my memory,
yeah.
but I think Tezuka got inspired by um, like Western film and Hollywood, and came out with some really amazing anime films and anime shows, and started that kind of created a wave to enter into Hollywood and get it, you know, seen throughout the world. It did take many years, I would say within the past 5 to 10 years, for anime to not be seen as like a foreign item, something that's not like, accepted. It's very like weird. If you watch anime, you're kind of a nerd. And it was like very derogatory towards people who watched it. But now it's seen as something, okay, it's another form of entertainment and consumption. I also think the like continual globalization of our world and interconnectedness through like social media and through the internet has helped to spread that as well. It's not a niche kind of, you know, sector anymore that, only people who like, fantasize about Japan, participate in. It's something that, people of all ages, the place I used to work, um, a man in his, I think, 40s, his son, himself, his mother, his grandma, everybody in the family watched Demon Slayer. And so now it's
Nice.
to the point where it is a cultural phenomenon throughout
Find it. It's right
the
here. You
world.
can see.
Yes, I love that. Oh my gosh.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I know, Brian, we kind of touched upon it in other podcasts, but I mean, your thoughts on like how the explosions really happen of anime and manga, and see it overtake a lot of the rankings in there, a lot of things too.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's, if I'm being brutally honest, it's because, and I'm looking at the North American market right now, like the explosion in the North American market. You alluded to this before, where it's, when you look at those ICV, whatever those lists are, you see adult graphic novels and you see the sales lists, and the top 20, 30, 40 are dominated by manga titles. And never in my wildest dreams would I ever believe that that would happen in North America again. And again, being brutal, it's because North American comics suck. Okay, they're really, really bad. The sales figures really concur with this. They're not fun. They're not fun. I have tried over the past, I want to say 6 months, I've made a vested effort to try and get back into Spider-Man, Hulk, Thor, Flash, JLA, whatever, like just trying to find some titles, and I can't do it. It's just so, I don't know. It's just not fun. And then I'm, reading Demon Slayer now, or if I'm checking out Attack on Titan, and I'm just like giggling like a little schoolgirl. It's just having a blast, right? It's just these, and again, that, going back to what we were talking about before, it's that love, right? These people, you can feel that love. And when I'm checking out these, books that when I started reading, I started on comic books. I didn't know what manga was until maybe I was into my early teens, right? I started reading comic books when I was like 6 years old. I picked up my first issue of Daredevil by Frank Miller, and I was just hooked, right? And
Yeah.
then I was lucky enough to be around in the 80s, where I think comic books were in their heyday, where you had creators like Walt Simonson and Frank Miller and Chris Claremont. And there's so many, I can't even, I could run off, for days and days and days. And they were creating stories that a lot of the properties that you see from the MCU are based on, right? Like the Phoenix Saga, their Secret Invasion coming out from Disney Plus, and all of these, they were just great, great stories. And then that, over the past 5 years, has plummeted to something that has become kind of like a machine, where they're just churning out product. And then you have, and I really hope this doesn't happen to manga, because it is turning into, it's graduated from niche to mainstream. And a lot of times when that happens, the end product tends to suffer, right? Because they want to churn out more and more and more. It gets watered down, all these different reasons. But, I really believe that's the reason why manga has taken off. And then you had the pandemic that happened, what is that, 3 years ago now?
Yeah.
Where people had a lot more time to discover more things. They hopped online, and it's a lot of word of mouth as well, where it's, oh, have you, heard of manga? Oh, no, I haven't heard of that. Well, you got to check out this title, check out Berserk, right? Or, on and on it goes. And that, it's just built like crazy. I never would have dreamed in a million years that
Yeah.
anime and manga would be where it is today. But I'm incredibly happy it has, because it's great storytelling, and it's just, fun. And that's what, people read these things and watch these shows for, is to have fun.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of fun. I'm glad that it's back out there and people really enjoy it. And I know when I was in high school, I was bringing stuff I was like, or middle school too, when I started watching, I was like, I gotta like not tell people that I'm watching an anime or my like have to hide it. And
The
now I'm
first
like,
time, yeah, sorry, the first time I watched anime, I didn't even know I was watching anime. It was a
yeah,
show
same
called
here.
Battle of the Planets, which I believe they renamed it. It was called Gatchaman in Japan, and it was about these like teenagers that dressed up like birds and went excuse me, went to battle Zoltar, I think the bad guy's name was. But I remember watching it, even I was like 5 or 6 years old, and there was just something about it. First of all, the animation was far superior to anything that we got to, like the Saturday morning cartoons,
Right.
and just the choreography and the fight scenes and all that. There's just something to it. And then I found out what it was. It was like, oh, this is from Japan, and that's why, it looks so different and it feels so different. And then you just go from there, right? It's like anything else. You kind of get a taste for it, and then you
Yeah.
want more and more and more and more, and you start discovering all these other titles and shows.
Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, big time. It grew my interest big time, and I think that was also part of like that tsunami wave too. I just started watching that, like running home from not running home from school, but getting home from school and watching those shows. But that leads me to the next question too. McKenna, what are you watching now, or is there any specific show that you have your focus on and watching?
I feel like because at this point I've watched so much anime, like I think I took one day actually when I was in college and was like, I want to see how many anime series I've actually watched in the past, 10, 15 years. And obviously it doesn't cover the whole scope because, obviously there's probably more series that I forgot about. I've watched at least 500 anime series.
Wow,
Wow, good for you.
that's awesome.
um, and currently, I've been watching just a mix. Whatever is on Crunchyroll, I pretty much just try out a few episodes, and if I like it, I like binge watch it. If I don't, I'm kind of like, okay, next series. So I'm kind of just following the main series. I was watching the latest season of My Hero Academia.
Oh,
So that was obviously it's really popular, but one of my favorites. I need to figure out where to watch Attack on Titans last season, obviously because Crunchyroll does not have it, I don't think.
No, I don't
But I
think they
really
do either.
I think it's on Funimation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because I've been keeping up with the content, and so I need to just find a time to watch that last part of the final season, the third part. It's very complex.
Yeah.
But obviously sometimes I rewatch old series, like things that I've watched like 3 to 5 times, just because nothing can beat early 2000s romantic comedies. So
That's great.
so I'm waiting for some of the other series to come. I've been watching a lot of manga slash webcomic to anime adaptations.
Nice.
Um, and those are some of my favorite, obviously, because I read the source material and then I watch the anime. So
That's
Yep.
awesome. That's great. That's really great. Yeah, I know how you feel. I usually revert back to I'm rewatching Samurai Champloo right now again. So like I just kind of like will binge that while I like work or listen to it in the background because I know what goes on. But Brian, how about yourself? What are you watching or reading now?
Unfortunately, I don't have that much time to do either. I mean, I spend most of my time actually writing the stuff, but I do like to take some time. And like I showed you here, Demon Slayer, I've been checking out. My son, he's over the past, I want to say, 12 months has become a manga maniac, just buying and buying books. And for the same reason that I got into manga, years before, where it's like he's trying to find Western books that just don't speak to him. The shows that I'm watching, I recently checked out One Punch Man, revisited that one because I'm a big superhero geek. So it's really kind of like the best of all worlds for me, where you have manga meets superheroes. So that's always a lot of fun. It amazes me. It's such a ridiculous premise. You have a hero called One Punch Man, and it works. Like,
Yeah.
how the heck does it work? And it just does. I checked out Chainsaw Man, which I enjoyed. Maybe not as much as the manga, but the anime was pretty good. Record of Ragnarok is another one that I checked simply because I'm into Norse mythology, love that whole kind of play on things. Don't necessarily like how they treated Thor and his hammer, especially in that one.
Yeah.
But again, that's creative license.
Yeah.
You're gonna do what you're gonna do. Attack on Titan, I'm way, way behind on, so I got to
oh no.
get caught up on that. And I enjoy Demon Slayer, but I like the manga better than that. So that's kind of like what's in my hopper. The one thing that I do want to watch again that I haven't watched in years is Ninja Scroll, my favorite anime film of all time. Just a beautiful, the characters, everything. It's like almost as close to perfect as you can get when it comes to producing a film, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's right up there. Like if you say, what's the perfect film? People will say Godfather or something like that. Well, this is like my Godfather of anime.
I love it. Yeah, Ninja Scroll is a good one. I haven't seen that in a while too, as well. But that's all the questions for today. McKenna, do you have any? Can you let the listeners know where they can find you or where they can, find King Bee and watch that?
Awesome. For me, I'm not on all social media, so mostly just on Instagram. The song is .author. I post generally not as much, but I do have a lot of times when I post the story about updates about King Bee. For King Bee itself, it is directly on the Voice Me site. So if you go to voice.me and just search up King Bee or look in the pilot series kind of page slash section, you'll find the series there. It should be floating around social, so hopefully you can find it there as well.
Nice.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thanks so much, and I appreciate your time, McKenna. And thank you so much for everything. Brian, thank you so much for joining. This has been a lot of fun. Great interview. So thank you guys so much for your time today, and I hope you guys have a great one.
Thanks for coming.
Thank
Great meeting you.
you. Great meeting you too.